Elias Thorne did not just own his pool, he curated it. He viewed it as his final, unassailable sanctuary, a pristine, cobalt blue infinity edge that spilled into a panoramic view of the manicured, exclusive community of Azure Crest. It was the only part of his highly demanding life as a tech visionary that he could truly control. Every chemical balance was monitored by an app on his custom-built dashboard. The temperature never deviated from a perfect 84 Baz Circ F. It was an engineering marvel, not a community splash pad. That's why the sight of a neon pink flamingo floaty, a garish, plastic monstrosity, bobbing lazily beside the travertine steps on a Tuesday afternoon made the meticulously organized structure of his world shudder. Elias, dressed in a crisp linen shirt despite working from home, moved from his climate-controlled office to the sliding glass door, his hand instinctively gripping the cool metal frame. He squinted through the polarized glass, already knowing the truth, but needing the brutal confirmation. Splayed out on the floaty, deeply engrossed in a massive spiral-bound novel, was Veronica Ronnie Sterling, Ronnie, HOA president, self-appointed Empress of Azure Crest. The woman who had once sent Elias a 6-page certified letter about the precisely 1 inch of untrimmed grass where his lawn met the sidewalk. And she was, definitively, trespassing. Elias took a deep, steadying breath. He was a man who negotiated million-dollar acquisitions before noon, who had faced down venture capitalists with the cold, logical precision of an algorithm. He was not prone to outbursts. He opened the door, the cool, conditioned air rushing past him replaced by the humid, fragrant heat of late summer. "Ronnie," Elias said, his voice flat, carrying across the still water without having to be raised. Ronnie didn't flinch. She shifted her oversized, mirrored sunglasses just enough to peer over the top of the frames. Her expression was a masterpiece of benign, practiced condescension. "Oh, Elias, there you are. I'm almost done with this chapter. Don't mind me." She even offered a small, infuriating wave before returning her attention to her book. He walked to the pool's edge, the smooth travertine tiles cool beneath his bare feet. The sight of her in his water, her bright blue designer swimsuit contrasting starkly with the pool's deep color, felt like a physical violation. "I do mind, Ronnie. This is private property," Elias stated, keeping his tone professional, almost glacial. "This is my pool, not the community amenity pool." Ronnie finally sighed, a dramatic, audible release of air that signaled she was being inconvenienced. She slowly pushed the floaty toward the edge. "Elias, darling, please. You know the community pool is having maintenance done all week. A broken skimmer, apparently. Disgusting. And it's 88 degrees out here. What kind of neighbor do you think I am? I certainly wasn't going to bake on the deck. Besides," she leveraged her considerable frame to prop herself up on an elbow, her expression hardening just slightly. "I'm the president of the HOA. I'm doing you a favor by testing the chemical levels. You know, making sure everything is up to code. The chemical levels are monitored remotely and are perfect. And you are not licensed to be testing anything on my property," Elias countered, his jaw clenching. He felt the familiar hot rush of pure, unadulterated entitlement radiating off her. "This isn't a favor, Ronnie. It's trespassing. I need you to exit the pool immediately and not return." Ronnie laughed. It was a practiced, airy sound, the kind of laugh that dismissed a complaint as utterly insignificant. "Oh, goodness, Elias, always so dramatic. Fine, I'm out. But honestly, you have this enormous, beautiful pool that sits empty 8 hours a day while you're cooped up in your little office, coding away. It's selfish not to share the abundance a bit. Think of the community spirit." She effortlessly swung her legs over the side, dripping water onto the pristine travertine. She gathered her towel, her book, and the ridiculous flamingo. As she reached the gate, she paused, turning back with a saccharine smile. "I'll send a maintenance request to have the community pool finished quickly. Until then, maybe just think of this as part of your annual HOA dues, okay? See you tomorrow, Elias." The gate clicked shut behind her, leaving Elias alone by his pool. The blue water now tainted not by chemicals, but by the sheer audacity of her presence. The faint smell of her expensive citrusy sunscreen lingered in the air. Elias didn't wait. He immediately contacted the HOA management company. He didn't call Ronnie. He went through the official channels, logging a formal complaint about trespassing and unauthorized use of private property by the HOA president. The response was infuriatingly bureaucratic. 3 days later, Elias received a form email, not from the management company, but CC'd from Ronnie herself. Subject: Neighborly dispute. Pool access, dear Mr. Thorne. The board has reviewed your concern regarding pool access during the community pool's temporary closure. As the HOA president, Ms. Sterling was momentarily utilizing the nearest available resource during an unprecedented heat wave and has assured the board this was a one-time good faith oversight. We encourage all members to foster an atmosphere of neighborly goodwill and collaboration. This matter is considered closed. Sincerely, HOA Board of Directors. Ronnie Sterling, Chair. Elias stared at the screen. The rage he usually kept bottled behind layers of professional composure starting to fizz and expand in his chest. A one-time oversight? He checked his security logs. She had been in the pool on Tuesday, Wednesday, and was now back Thursday morning before he even started his day. The next day, Friday, was when the passive-aggressive war escalated into open conflict. Elias was in the kitchen making coffee when he heard the distinct sounds of laughter and a splash. Not one splash, several. He dropped the mug, thankfully plastic, but the clatter was loud, and sprinted to the window. This time, Ronnie wasn't alone. She had 2 friends, equally bronzed, equally designer-clad, and a small rolling cooler set up beside the pool's diving rock. They were sharing a bottle of rosé, floating on his customized imported pool rafts. The sight felt like a public exhibition of his failure to maintain control. Elias walked out, not stopping at the edge but walking right up to the cooler, planting himself between them and the travertine. "Get out! Now! All of you!" Elias ordered, his voice low and tight, devoid of any attempt at formality. Ronnie pulled her head out of the water, droplets running down her face. She looked genuinely annoyed that he'd interrupt their party. "Elias, this is getting ridiculous. You have the pool. We're in it. We'll be gone by lunch. What's the big deal? I told my friends this is the best water in the entire subdivision." "So exclusive," she said, giggling with her friends who immediately looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. "The big deal is that it's theft. It's invasion. It's trespassing," Elias ground out. He pulled out his phone, already pointing the camera at her. "I am calling the non-emergency police line for trespassing. I have filed the official HOA complaint, which you summarily dismissed. Now I'm filing a police report, and if you don't exit the property in 60 seconds, I will be filing a restraining order and suing you and the HOA for liability should any of your guests be injured on my property." The word suing and the sight of the camera finally wiped the smugness off Ronnie's face. She didn't look scared. She looked furious. "You wouldn't dare. I'm the president. I'll fine you for harassment. I'll get your application for the architectural committee rejected. You will live to regret this petty little—" 60 seconds, Ronnie. Get out." Elias cut her off, his eyes cold. The threat of legal consequences, specifically the mention of a lawsuit and police involvement, was the only thing that moved her. Muttering furiously under her breath something about new money upstarts, Ronnie and her friends grudgingly climbed out, grabbing their gear and rosé bottle, leaving wet footprints on the deck. They were gone in under 5 minutes. But as Ronnie walked backward toward the gate, she stopped, pointing a manicured finger at Elias. "This isn't over, Elias. This pool is a menace to the neighborhood, and you are a horrible neighbor. Just you wait." Elias didn't respond. He simply went back inside. He knew the HOA, which Ronnie essentially ran, would use every petty regulation in the binder to make his life miserable. They would scrutinize his garden gnomes, his trash can placement, the exact hue of his exterior paint. The legal and bureaucratic war was coming, and he was ready for it. He spent Saturday morning setting up an industrial-grade security system facing the pool, complete with clear, laminated no trespassing, private property signs posted every 10 feet. He thought that would be enough. The signs, the confrontation, the threat of legal action. He was wrong. On Sunday, at 4:30 p.m., the security alert pinged on his dashboard. Motion detected by the pool. Elias looked at the live feed. Ronnie was back. She had climbed the wall from the neighbor's yard, ignoring the gate entirely. She had taken off her shoes and was standing at the very edge of the infinity pool, looking directly into the camera. She gave a small, deliberate, theatrical bow to the camera lens. "Your signs are tacky, Elias. You have no community spirit?" she shouted, her voice easily picked up by the camera's sensitive microphone. Then, with an air of complete, triumphant defiance, she dove, executing a clumsy cannonball into the crystal water. She surfaced, splashing water toward the camera, her face beaming with victory. Elias, watching the spectacle from his control room, felt something. The silence that followed the sudden, thick churning of the pool was more terrifying than a scream. For a moment, Elias Thorne stood frozen on the deck, the empty yellow flocculent container in his hand, watching the consequences of his long-suppressed rage unfold in a blinding, chalky white haze. Ronnie Sterling's gasp of contented relaxation instantly became a wet, rasping cough. The water, no longer the perfect medium of relaxation, now felt like a suffocating blanket of viscous, chemically infused milk. She clawed at the water, her movements frantic as she tried to navigate the now completely opaque substance. She couldn't see the edge. She couldn't see anything. The thick particles stung her eyes and coated her skin with an unpleasant, chalky film. She finally hit the travertine steps with a panicked scramble, emerging from the pool sputtering and enraged. She wasn't injured, but she was a spectacle, soaked, dripping, and coated head to toe in the blinding white residue. Her expensive swimsuit looked like it had been dipped in plaster. "What did you do?" she shrieked, the sound echoing off the stucco walls of the neighboring houses. Her voice was raw, fueled by violation and fury. She wiped furiously at her mirrored sunglasses, which were now uselessly plastered with the white slurry. Elias, who had regained his composure the moment the powder hit the water, looked down at her with the cold, measured calm that usually preceded a corporate takeover. He set the empty container neatly on the ground beside the skimmer. "I sanitized my private property, Ronnie," Elias replied, his voice level. "It appears your unauthorized use coincided with a mandatory emergency hyperflocculation process. I apologize for the inconvenience to your unauthorized swim." Ronnie advanced on him, leaving a trail of milky footprints on the expensive stone. Her face was contorted, the mask of benign condescension shattered, replaced by pure volcanic fury. "You contaminated the water. You assaulted me. This is criminal!" "I'm calling the police, and I'm calling a hazmat team." "You just poisoned me, Elias! You tried to kill me!" Elias met her gaze without flinching. He gestured toward the security camera he had installed the day before, which was running a continuous record of the entire confrontation. "You climbed the wall," ignoring two large laminated no trespassing signs, which are visible on camera, Elias pointed out. "You explicitly stated your intention to trespass moments before diving in. I did not physically touch you. I added an inert clarifier, readily available at any pool supply store, to my own water to remove organic matter, which was excessive due to, well, unauthorized activity. Flocculant is non-toxic, Ronnie. It's chalk. It makes the water look disgusting and requires draining, but it is not poison. However, assaulting me, the homeowner, on my private property is a criminal offense. I suggest you stay where you are or exit the property immediately before the police arrive." Ronnie hesitated. The threat of police intervention, coupled with Elias's unnerving composure and the clear presence of the camera, momentarily stopped her forward momentum. She knew enough about the law to understand the fine line between a civil property dispute and an outright crime. She had been caught red-handed. The assault claim was weak, especially when she was clearly trespassing. She pivoted instead toward the ultimate power she wielded, bureaucracy. "You are finished, Thorne." "Finished in this community," she spat, her voice thick with promise. "I don't need the police. I am the HOA. I own the covenant. You just contaminated a massive amount of water that is going to seep into the ground, ruin the filtration system, and cost tens of thousands of dollars to fix. I will levy every single fine available until you are bankrupt, and then I will force the sale of this house. Enjoy watching your little sanctuary become a health hazard." She stomped toward the wall she had climbed, not even bothering with the gate this time, disappearing over the top with clumsy effort. Elias waited precisely 30 seconds before taking out his phone. He didn't call the police. He called his attorney, specializing in property law. He spent the next hour downloading all the security footage, backing up every email and documenting the physical state of the pool. The pool, once a work of art, was now a swirling, sickly white mausoleum. The retaliation was swift and brutally efficient. By Tuesday morning, an envelope was taped to Elias's front door, sealed with the official HOA crest. It was heavy, containing a stack of 7 official violations and 3 pages of legal demands. Violation notices: improper pool maintenance. Fine, $1,500 day. Citing the pool's toxic, opaque, and aesthetically unacceptable condition, demanding immediate remediation, draining, and professional cleaning. Environmental hazard, fine $5,000. Citing the improper discharge of excessive chemical matter into the water, with an implicit threat of informing the city environmental services. Aggressive behavior, fine $1,000. Citing his alleged harassment of a fellow resident and HOA official, Ronnie, during her temporary use of the facility. Improper signage, fine $500. Citing the no trespassing signs as garish, commercial, and non-conforming to neighborhood aesthetic guidelines. The total initial fine was over $8,000, with daily penalties compounding. The final document was a notice of emergency board meeting called for Wednesday evening, with the sole agenda item listed as consideration and vote on mandatory pool remediation, special assessment, and potential line proceedings against Unit 47. Elias felt the cold knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. Ronnie hadn't just retaliated. She had weaponized the entire bureaucracy. She had turned his defense against her into her primary attack against him. He immediately called Mrs. Chen, a quiet, retired civil engineer who sat on the architectural committee and was known for her strict adherence to the actual rules, not Ronnie's interpretations. Elias knew she had long been a silent resistor to Ronnie's overreach. "Mrs. Chen, it's Elias Thorne. I need your eyes on something," he said, skipping any pleasantries. Within the hour, Mrs. Chen was in his office, her face unreadable as she reviewed the documentation and watched the security footage of Ronnie's grand entrance and chalky exit. "She's fast," Mrs. Chen murmured, tapping a manicured nail on the $5,000 environmental fine notice. She used the pool to justify the contamination fine, and she used the contamination fine to justify the lien threat. Textbook power play. But the signs were compliant, and the flocculant is not toxic. The rules clearly state— Elias started, agitated. Mrs. Chen held up a hand. "The rules, Elias, are what Ronnie says they are until someone pays enough to challenge them. But you gave her the high ground by introducing the chemical element. It makes you look unstable." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "The problem isn't the flocculant, Elias. The problem is her notice of emergency meeting. She can't just call an emergency meeting for a fine. She has to prove a structural or immediate health crisis. You need to delay that meeting and get ahead of the narrative. How?" She chairs the committee. The Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, Section 5.3, Subclause B, Mrs. Chen recited from memory. Any resident facing punitive action must be given a minimum of 7 business days to prepare a formal defense and request arbitration prior to a full board vote on a special assessment or lien. Ronnie is violating the core charter by giving you less than 48 hours. Elias felt a surge of adrenaline, a crack in the fortress. "So I challenge the notice, not the fine." "Precisely," Mrs. Chen said, giving him a rare, thin smile. "You need to submit a formal legal document, not just an email, demanding the 7-day period. This buys you time to clean the pool, nullifying her biggest visible argument, and it forces her to adhere to her own rules. She hates that more than anything." Elias spent the rest of the day with his lawyer drafting the 7-day notice. But even as the legal groundwork was being laid, Ronnie was one step ahead. On Wednesday afternoon, 3 hours before the fraudulently called emergency meeting was set to begin, a massive truck bearing the logo of a commercial pool repair company pulled up outside Elias's house. Two burly men, directed by an extremely nervous-looking HOA property manager, began unloading heavy equipment. Elias walked out onto his driveway, immediately wary. "What is this?" "I did not authorize any work." The property manager, a young man named Kevin who avoided eye contact, nervously held up a clipboard. "Mr. Thorne, this is authorized." "This is an official notice from the HOA board, President Sterling presiding." Kevin shoved a newly printed notice into Elias's hand. It wasn't a fine. It was worse. Mandatory pool drainage and seizure notice. Due to the severity of the chemical contamination and the potential hazard to surrounding soil and groundwater, the Azure Crest HOA, under Article 9, Section 2 of the Covenants, is initiating mandatory remediation. The pool is deemed an immediate safety hazard and must be drained and inspected by an HOA-approved contractor. The cost of this mandatory action, including the subsequent water refill and chemical rebalancing, will be applied as a special non-negotiable assessment against Unit 47, effective immediately. Elias stared at the paper, his vision narrowing on a single. Crippling line item, estimated special assessment, $28,000. The cost was astronomical, inflated far beyond reality. Ronnie hadn't just fined him. She was bankrupting him through mandatory, expensive, and unnecessary physical work. And worse, they were about to destroy his meticulously balanced, technologically advanced pool system, ELIA. The massive pool repair truck idled on Elias's driveway, its engine a deep, resonant rumble that shook the manicured tranquility of Azure Crest. Kevin, the property manager, held the official notice like a shield, his eyes darting nervously between Elias and the two burly contractors who were now positioning the high-capacity drainage pump near the pool's main outlet. The clock was ticking. Any interference, as Kevin had warned, would lead to the police and a charge of obstruction. Elias did not engage in the shouting match Kevin was clearly braced for. Instead, he maintained the cold, analytical focus of a man solving an intractable, high-stakes system error. He had only a moment to disrupt this physical seizure of his property. He didn't call the HOA. He called the number listed on the contractor's uniform, the corporate office of Blue Wave Remediation Services. A pleasant, automated voice answered. Elias bypassed the menu with practiced keystrokes, landing immediately on the legal and insurance department. "This is Elias Thorne, Unit 47, Azure Crest. Your crew is on my private property and is moments away from executing an illegal, unbonded property seizure," Elias stated, his voice sharp and precise, cutting through the recorded greeting. "You need to contact your foreman now. I am currently uploading 7 minutes of video evidence showing the Azure Crest HOA president, Ronnie Sterling, criminally trespassing on my property, illegally authorizing this work without due process, and violating 3 distinct sections of the HOA charter, including the 7-day notice period required for a special assessment vote." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. The man on the other end, clearly used to customer disputes, hesitated. "Sir, we follow the HOA's legal mandate." "You follow the law," Elias interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "If your crew so much as opens the valve, I will have my attorney file a temporary restraining order naming Blue Wave Remediation as a co-defendant in a civil suit for trespass, property damage, and malicious destruction of private property. That $28,000 bill Ronnie signed off on will be your company's liability. Do you have a fiduciary bond against a $500,000 lawsuit for interfering with private property rights?" "I didn't think so." "Shut it down now, or face discovery." The sheer scope and financial weight of the threat worked instantly. The man on the line stammered, promising to contact the crew immediately. Elias walked back to the pool, staring directly at the foreman who was bending over the discharge hose. His phone rang almost instantly. Elias answered, holding the speaker up for the crew and Kevin to hear. "Yeah, Carl. Stop. Stop all work. Immediately unhook the pump and secure the vehicle. We have a major legal conflict on the property, and this is not authorized under the current bond. Do not touch the drain. I repeat, stand down or you are fired." The foreman, a heavy-set man named Carl, stood up slowly, looking bewildered. He shot a look at Kevin, the manager. "Manager, your paperwork is contested," Carl announced gruffly. "We're standing down. Call the office when your legal ducks are in a row." Kevin's face went white. The HOA's one true power, its ability to impose irreversible physical action, had just been negated by a few minutes of cold, calculated corporate blackmail. You cannot stop this, Mr. Thorne. This has been voted on. The meeting is in 45 minutes, Kevin pleaded, the clipboard trembling in his grasp. The vote is invalid, Kevin. Section 5.3, subclause B, 7 days notice. Ronnie is violating the covenant she swore to uphold, Elias said, retrieving the emergency notice and tearing it in half, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. Tell Ronnie I'll see her at the meeting, and tell her to bring her lawyer. 40 minutes later, the community center's multi-purpose room was a hive of frantic, nervous energy. The emergency meeting was packed not just with the 3 remaining, usually docile board members, but with about 30 curious, sweating residents who had heard rumors of the spectacular, chalk-white pool, and the rumored $28,000 lien. Ronnie, standing at the head of the conference table, was radiating an aura of confident, righteous indignation. She had changed into a tailored white suit, projecting an image of immaculate authority meant to contrast with Elias's perceived chaos. And so, the board acted decisively to mitigate this environmental disaster, Ronnie was declaring, gesturing emphatically. This homeowner, Elias Thorne, willfully injected an unknown, destabilizing agent into his private pool, turning it into a biohazard and threatening the structural integrity of the surrounding community properties. His flagrant disregard for our safety warrants an immediate special assessment, and frankly, I will be moving to revoke his membership privileges entirely. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Ronnie had successfully framed Elias as the unstable aggressor. Just as Ronnie was about to call for the final punitive vote, the double doors at the back of the room swung open, and Elias Thorne walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a crisp t-shirt and jeans, projecting a sense of unaffected competence that clashed violently with the room's formal pretension. Trailing him was Mrs. Chen, holding a thick binder and a new, unfamiliar face. A lean, middle-aged woman with the sharp, intelligent eyes of a seasoned litigator. Ronnie's eyes narrowed to slits. "Mr. Thorne, you are late. This meeting is restricted to board members and their legal counsel. You do not have standing to address the board at this time." Elias stopped at the head of the table, directly opposite Ronnie. His lawyer, Brenda Shue, stepped forward, placing a thick stack of documents stamped with a federal court seal on the table. The sight of the official seal caused an instant, nervous hush among the board members. "Good evening, Ms. Sterling," Brenda said, her voice dry and authoritative. "My client, Mr. Elias Thorne, is here to address the fraudulent nature of this meeting and to present a counter-lien demand against the HOA, specifically naming you, President Sterling, for breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of community funds, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Ronnie laughed, the loud, dismissive, practiced sound. "A counter-lien? On what grounds?" "You contaminated your own property." "On the grounds that this meeting is illegal," Mrs. Chen interjected calmly, sliding her own copy of the covenant across the table. Article 9, Section 2 is about environmental threats. This is a maintenance issue, and Article 5.3, Subclause B, mandates 7 business days for defense against a special assessment. This meeting, called with less than 48 hours' notice, is an illegal ambush designed to circumvent due process. As the board members, one of whom was a nervous accountant, started whispering, Elias stepped up, addressing the room. "Not Ronnie. Let me cut through the bureaucracy," Elias said, his voice carrying the calm weight of undeniable truth. "Mrs. Sterling told you I polluted my pool. She is correct. I added a non-toxic water clarifier after she repeatedly and criminally trespassed on my property, ignoring my warnings and formal complaints, and illegally using my pool as her private amenity." Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small portable projector. In a move only a tech visionary would make, he connected it to the room's HDMI port, overriding the screensaver that had been displaying the HOA logo. I have 7 minutes of security footage, time-stamped, proving that Ms. Sterling trespassed on 3 separate occasions, the last of which involved her climbing a fence to defy a no trespassing sign, Elias stated. Clicking the play button, the large screen behind Ronnie instantly filled with crystal-clear footage. The first clip showed Ronnie's theatrical cannonball, her triumphant yell echoing through the room. "Your signs are tacky, Elias. You have no community spirit," followed immediately by the shot of the flocculent powder being poured and Ronnie scrambling, choking out of the milky water. The assembled residents gasped. They had heard Ronnie's version, that Elias had randomly attacked her. They hadn't seen the clear, brazen, recorded trespassing. Ronnie's face was now crimson, her composure completely gone. "That is doctored. That is edited. You are slandering the board," she screamed, slamming her hand on the table. Brenda Shue stepped forward again, placing another document down. "This is a transcript of an audio recording taken directly from the security camera's microphone of Ms. Sterling threatening my client after her last trespass. It includes her explicit threat to force the sale of this house and levy every fine until you are bankrupt. This constitutes a clear intent to use her office for malicious personal retaliation." Elias pointed a finger not at Ronnie, but at the remaining board members. Ronnie knew this meeting was illegal. She knew the $28,000 assessment was grossly inflated. She attempted to use the full weight of the HOA's legal power to financially destroy a private homeowner, me, because I refused to let her use my pool. "This is not governance. It is tyranny." The nervous accountant, Mr. Henderson, looked utterly devastated. I was told this was an emergency health issue. I was misled." Mrs. Chen seized the moment. "President Sterling has just violated the bylaws, conducted an illegal meeting, and attempted to authorize a fraudulent special assessment for personal revenge. We have grounds for an immediate vote of no confidence." The room erupted. Residents shouted questions at Ronnie, demanding to know if she really climbed the fence. The board members, desperate to save their own liability, scrambled to distance themselves. Ronnie stood alone at the table, her elegant white suit now seeming ironically theatrical. The week following the infamous emergency meeting was a period of tense, precarious calm. Elias Thorne had won the immediate battle, but the air felt heavy with the promise of unseen threats. The milky, opaque water of his pool was drained, flushed, and professionally rebalanced by a non-HOA-approved crew, restoring the cobalt sheen to his aquatic sanctuary. Yet Elias found no peace there. Every ripple felt like a warning, every passing car a potential spy. Ronnie Sterling had vanished from the public view of Azure Crest, a ghost of her former omnipresent golf cart driving self. But Elias knew she hadn't retreated. She had simply changed her theater of operations. She's off the board, but she's not off the warpath. Brenda Shue, Elias's attorney, had warned him over the phone. She's a true sociopath of suburban politics. Her reputation is ruined here, so her only option is to ruin yours in a domain she can't touch, your work. Watch your email. Watch the tech blogs. She'll attack your core. Elias had taken the warning seriously. He was in the final, most delicate stage of closing a Series C funding round for his AI automation firm, Ethel. The funding, led by the notoriously cautious and influential venture capital firm, Pillarstone Partners, was worth $90 million and would validate years of work. The closing was scheduled for the following Monday. He couldn't afford even a whisper of instability. The attack came not through a lawsuit or a fine, but with the cold, surgical precision of a data breach. On Friday morning, Elias was on a video conference with Pillarstone's lead partner, Julian Vance. The conversation was going flawlessly. The final documents were being reviewed, and the mood was buoyant. "Elias, we're incredibly excited about this," Vance said, beaming from his high-resolution screen. "The due diligence is clean. We just need to button up a few last-minute character reference checks, but everything looks smooth for the Monday wire." Elias smiled, relief washing over him. "That's fantastic, Julian. We've worked hard for this." Vance's expression suddenly changed. His smile evaporated, replaced by a deep furrow of confusion, then concern. He glanced down at a physical paper on his desk, his brow knitting. "Actually, Elias, about those character checks. A peculiar document landed on my desk about 10 minutes ago. It's an anonymous submission citing a recent dramatic incident in your community. Elias felt a crushing drop in his stomach. The air in his pristine office suddenly felt too thin. What kind of document, Julian? Vance picked up the paper, turning it away from the camera, though the effect was clear. He began to read, his voice losing its warmth, becoming stiff and formal. It details a situation involving President Ronnie Sterling and Elias Thorne, an emotionally unstable homeowner with a penchant for chemical warfare. It specifically mentions the use of highly toxic industrial-grade chemicals to attack a neighbor, and a subsequent violent recorded outburst at a public meeting, suggesting you are prone to unpredictable, aggressive behavior and unfit to lead a company entrusted with public data and large sums of capital. The anonymous submission had not just described the flocculent incident. It had amplified and deliberately misrepresented it, twisting the defense into an assault. The reference to the violent recorded outburst was a perfect distortion of the viral video of Ronnie's own screaming fit, painting Elias as the aggressor. Julian, that is a vicious, libelous fabrication written by the person I had legally removed from the HOA presidency for her own criminal trespassing, Elias explained, fighting to keep his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. I used a non-toxic pool clarifier, essentially chalk powder, in my own pool to prevent her from trespassing a fourth time. My lawyer has all the documentation, including the security footage showing her erratic behavior and my legal victory. Vance was unmoved. I understand there are two sides to every story, Elias. But the level of detail, the mention of flocculent, the $28,000 lien threat, the HOA's immediate reversal, it's too specific to be dismissed as simple gossip. It paints a picture of intense, potentially public instability. At $90 million, Elias, our investors demand complete predictability. We need to pause the wire transfer. Until we can conduct an independent third-party investigation into your personal conduct, we are moving to a 48-hour conditional extension. The 48-hour extension was a death sentence. It gave the submission time to spread and gave Pillarstone time to back out cleanly. Ronnie hadn't just retaliated. She had gone straight for the nuclear option, aiming for the destruction of his professional identity. Elias ended the call, the silence in the office deafening. The financial and professional stakes were now exponentially higher than the pool dispute. He felt the cold, hard reality of Ronnie's threat. Now you have to fight me. Elias immediately called Brenda Shue, authorizing her to initiate a preliminary libel and defamation suit against any published source repeating the anonymous claims. But he knew that litigation was slow. He needed a devastating counterattack, a preemptive strike that would silence Ronnie permanently before the 48 hours expired. He couldn't rely on the legal system. He had to use the one tool he possessed that Ronnie didn't: data. Elias didn't leave his office for the next 18 hours. He directed his vast technical resources, not his company's but his own, personal network of open-source intelligence tools and proprietary scraping algorithms at Azure Crest. His goal was simple: find the source of Ronnie's power, the everything about everyone she boasted about, and determine the true reason she had fought so fiercely to keep her HOA position. He started by analyzing the HOA's public records, something she had always kept opaque. Using digital forensics, he cross-referenced community meeting minutes, vendor contracts, and the HOA's unaudited financial statements, documents that had been intentionally left disorganized during her tenure. The first lead was subtle: a recurring, oddly large contract paid to a shell corporation for beautification consulting and emergency repairs. The company, Ariel Crest Maintenance, was paid $5,000 every quarter for the last 5 years. Elias cross-referenced the corporate registration of Ariel Crest Maintenance. The registration address was a small post office box in a neighboring county. The registered agent? Douglas Sterling. Ronnie's recently divorced, usually invisible husband, Ronnie, had been illegally funneling community funds, $100,000 over 5 years, into her ex-husband's pocket through fraudulent maintenance contracts while she was simultaneously levying inflated fines on neighbors for petty infractions. This wasn't just a political squabble. It was systematic fraud and embezzlement. The unprecedented heat wave and the broken skimmer that forced her to use Elias's pool, likely a lie to cover up her husband's substandard or non-existent work on the community pool, or worse, a tactic to make her seem indispensable. The emotional stakes flipped instantly. Elias was no longer fighting a petty neighbor. He was exposing a serious federal crime. He printed out the evidence: 5 years of canceled checks, the corporate registration, and Ronnie's own signature on the authorization forms. The stack of paper felt heavy in his hands, the definitive, undeniable proof of her corruption. He had the means to destroy her permanently. He could hand this file to the FBI or expose it at the community level. But exposing it publicly would create a scandal that might still tank his Pillarstone deal due to the negative press. Ronnie's threat echoed in his mind. I was the only thing holding this community together. If he exposed the embezzlement, the HOA, already reeling from his counterlien, would collapse financially. Every single homeowner, including Mrs. Chen and the nervous accountant, would be hit with a massive emergency assessment to cover the stolen funds. Elias would save himself, but he would financially ruin the entire community. He looked at the digital clock on his screen. 48 hours until Pillarstone's decision. He had to choose between personal survival and community stability. He walked over to his backyard, looking out at the perfectly clean blue water of his pool. He saw a shadow move across the far end of his lawn, near the fence line where Ronnie had climbed. It was too late for a simple defense. He needed to finish what he started, but with absolute precision. He needed to deliver a final, public shock that would protect his reputation while giving Ronnie the karmic justice she deserved, without destroying the innocent neighbors. He opened his laptop, drafted a single email, and attached the damning financial report. He needed a messenger, a trusted public face, to deliver the final blow to Ronnie, ensuring the focus remained on her crimes, not his vendetta. He addressed the email to Mrs. Chen, the new interim HOA president. But as he hit send, he saw something else move on his property. A flicker of light, low to the ground, near his pool pump housing. He zoomed in on the live security feed. A dark silhouette was crouched beside the very equipment shed where he kept his flocculant. The door was slightly ajar. The figure, small and quick, was fiddling with the electrical wiring leading into the pump. Ronnie wasn't waiting for the legal documents. She was attempting a final desperate act of physical sabotage against the very heart of his sanctuary. Elias's hand shot out, grabbing his phone to dial 911. Before he could dial, the figure stood up. It was Ronnie. But her actions were strangely deliberate. She wasn't just cutting a wire. She placed something small and metallic near the control panel, then quickly retreated. A moment late,